Thank you again to our panel one panelists for a very informative session. Right now, we want to welcome everyone to panel two, which is getting to know faculty and letters of recommendation. Today, we have an amazing set of panelists, so I'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves first, and we can go ahead and open up the floor to questions right after. So we can go ahead and start off with Dr. Hidalgo.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hidalgo. I teach in the chemistry and biochemistry department. I teach some upper level professional development classes, but my heart is really in the Gen Chem class. So that's really where I spend most of my time and efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Hidalgo. We can go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Pimentel.
You're muted. You're muted.
I do that all the time. So, I'm sorry, I apologize. So, my name is Angel Pimentel. I'm a faculty in the molecular and cellular biology department, and I teach introductory biology, bioethics, and evolution of modern biology. So,
Thank you, Dr. Pimentel. We can go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Cohen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zoe Cohen. I am an associate professor in the Department of Physiology. So I recognize a lot of you. And Bridge, I have to say, I thought you were your brother. I had to text him halfway through to say, wait a minute.
He's probably sleeping right
now. But I am, so I teach upper division physiology courses. I also teach quite a bit in the medical school. I teach in the foundations block as well as in the CPR block, which is the cardio block of medical school. I'm also the chair of the admissions committee right now for the College of Medicine. And I am the director of a program called HEAP, which is Honors Early Assurance Program. So if you are a junior in the Honors College, this is a great opportunity. There's an application, it's open right now. It will close, I think, mid-February, but it would be a guaranteed seat in the next cohort of medical school. So I can answer questions about all this. Obviously, I'll put my my information in, and Renee and everyone else will send it out. So I'm very happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. And our last and final panelist for today is Dr. Bilestein.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Bilestein. I teach introductory cell and molecular biology, which Dr. Pimentel also teaches. I'm actually a faculty member in the School of Plant Sciences, though, and my research is very much on plants, although there's a lot of molecular biology overlap. As you know, plants just another model organism. I do write lots of letters of recommendation for students who come through my class as they prepare for medical school. And so it's interesting to have insight into that, especially from the end of people who will request letters of recommendation. So it's nice to talk to many of you now before the requests come in and to disseminate some of the really important information that you can provide us as we prepare to advocate for you really in the next step in your professional development, which I should say is a pleasure to do for the students who come through the university. And you should never be shy to ask for letters of recommendation. You know, it's an important part of our job. It is part of the job. It's not something extra or something voluntary. It's part of the job. And so it's really fun to be able to talk about that with you guys before the process begins.
Thank you, Dr. Bilestein, and thank you to all our panelists for taking the time to be here today with everyone. And so I can go ahead and pass it on to Bridge to start us off with a very common question that a lot of us students have for our professors.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I think, like Kobe said, there's a lot of questions right now, especially surrounding COVID. So for all the panelists, the first question we'd like to ask you all is, given that all the classes right now are virtual for the most part, what advice can you offer to students who are trying to get to know their professors better with sort of this virtual era we're in right now?
I'll start. I suggest reaching out, and if you can't make the office hour times, asking if you can set up a Zoom meeting just to introduce, because it used to be really nice. We'd be in the lecture hall and students would come up and introduce themselves in class, and I miss that part of things. So it's been nice to get some, suggestions or the interest in taking some time for a Zoom meeting so I can get to know them personally, since we don't have that opportunity. And I think that's probably the best way to go about getting to know your professors right now, and perhaps one of the only for some of us. So that's my suggestion. And it's appreciated on my end when people do reach out and ask for those Zoom times.
In my case, I will recommend you to be, even we are meeting virtually, just be proactive in the class, ask questions, try to attend opportunities that many of us give to the group. For example, I have a weekly review meeting, right, in which we do different things from the lecture, and I always get the same number of students, around 17, 20 out of almost 400, it's like 380 now. But it makes a difference. I do remember the name of those students. I don't know their faces, but I remember the first name and last name of many of those 20 students. And if they email me, I will know that these are students that were really engaged in the class. There's something there's an experience that will make me remember them when that time comes.
I would just sort of agree with everybody else. I think, I've been trying to get my students to think about what they're thankful for, and especially things that they're maybe thankful for with this craziness of the pandemic. And I would say that Zoom is one of the things I'm thankful for. I mean, it is a nice way, I can actually see people. And so, office hours are great, even virtual office hours. I mean, we still have a lot of fun in those if you have come to any of them. And if not, absolutely reach out. Setting up Zoom, in some ways is easier. In some ways, obviously, I miss, sharing a cup of coffee, but it's still a great way to get to know faculty. I have a couple of students, again, being on the admissions committee, I'm seeing all these letters. I'm seeing letters from Dr. Hidalgo, from Dr. Pimentel, and Dr. Bilestein, almost every second week. And so, and letters from myself, which is always kind of funny to read. But, a lot of the letters I've written more recently are students that I only know through Zoom. And yet I still feel like I know them. So there are ways to get to know faculty, even though we're separated right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree as well with what others have said. I've had a very interesting experience teaching such a large class via Zoom this semester. Our typical class, right around 300 students on Zoom. Of course, I can't see everyone, but it's amazing what a difference just leaving your camera on and being an attentive individual can make for me as a professor, just because I'm used to seeing you guys all sitting out in the audience and trying to gauge whether you get something or whether, we're all on the same page. That's difficult for me during Zoom. But there are a couple of students who leave their cameras on during class, and they have become an incredible comfort to me. I could tell you exactly who they are. I know their names. They pay attention. They nod when I say things. It's very reassuring. So if you really want to get noticed, consider playing an easy strategy, which is make your face available.
Awesome. Thank you all very much for that first question. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the panelists directly.
So we do have one question in the chat. Someone asked, how far in advance should you ask for a letter of recommendation?
I will appreciate if I get at least a couple of months before the deadline or the time that you want that letter to be submitted. I have been in cases in which students show up like 2 weeks, 1 week, and it's like I will need to drop things in order to do that, you know, to write that letter.
Yeah, I think, you know, the longer you can give a faculty member, the better. Because again, we are busy, and sometimes they get kind of put aside. So I also strongly suggest gentle reminders to your faculty. And I mean that, really be kind. We are, are busy, and we do, as Mark said, we love doing this. This is one of our joys, is to see our students succeed, to move on, to do amazing things. And so, but things can slip through the cracks, and so we really do appreciate, getting, so, earlier, maybe, a little reminder. I just saw in the chat. Yeah, so AMCAS, which is the service that for the medical school, and there's others for CASPA and Interfolio, things like that. Those, you put in our email, and then we get a link kind of thing, or we get a PDF from you with some information, and then we submit the letter. So you don't see the letter, but yeah, you want to first ask the professor before we get the link. I have gotten that a couple of times as well, where all of a sudden I get a link saying, can you please submit this letter? And I've never heard from the student. That's a little weird. Do's and don'ts. I mean, I'm just jumping over this, so I apologize to all my other panelists. I'm just sort of looking really quickly. Do's and don'ts. I mean, again, I think, in the old days, we would say, come in, meet with us. We'll, get to know you a little bit better. Now, of course, it's all on Zoom. If you haven't had any of the classes, again, you can reach out. We can set up a Zoom meeting. I mean, not me personally, any of your faculty. And that's a way to get to know faculty and start early. So I'll stop now and let other people answer some of the questions, because I don't want to take over completely.
So another question we have in the chat is, if you taught a student in their sophomore year who would like a letter of rec in later years, would you recommend asking for a letter while we are in your class, but then checking in periodically before we actually need a letter later on?
Yes, I absolutely recommend that, because then it also allows us to sort of put a face to your name and think about the experiences we've had with you in the class, because the more we can personalize the letter and state, here is an instance that demonstrates why I feel the student will be great for this, that's going to make a very personalized and the most supportive type of letter that we can write. So the more we can know you, the more we can do that. And so I really like it when students reach out way in ahead of time and ask me for something like this, because it gives me an opportunity to think about it and write a nice letter. But if I get a sharp email like, hey, I need a letter in a week, here's the link, it doesn't really go over very well. So, I mean, I have turned down letters from people who ask me in that way, because I'm not going to write anything very pleasant, and I don't want to do that. But so absolutely, the sooner the better, and the more personalized we can make it, the better. And that's up to you being proactive, which is something that many of us have said. So we like to get to know you. That's why we do this. Like, we're really excited about you guys, and we want to support your future. So the more we can do that, the happier we are.
Yeah, I think it's a nice thing for someone to reach out and tell me, I really enjoyed this class, let's say. I'm assuming you're asking someone to write your letter because you enjoyed the class. Like maybe that is another do's and don'ts. If you hated the class, you know, and it was just maybe don't, because anyhow, that's an obvious thing. So, but beyond that, I agree that, you know, if you come up to me and say, hey, I really enjoyed this class, and I think, you know, here's a couple of things I learned that I just thought were super cool. And here's my end goal. And I think I'd like to come back and ask you for a letter when the time comes. And I'm going to remember that. I'm going to say, oh yeah, when you come back 2 years later, you know, well, I'm not sure I'll be able to pull up that our exact interaction, but it will certainly prompt me and remind me to go back and remind myself who you are. Also, since we're kind of moving in this direction anyhow, another great thing is, aside from the Zoom meeting, that's a must for me. If you ask me for a letter, I want to meet you now via Zoom. And two, I typically am going to ask you for your personal statement before I write the letter. That is incredibly helpful. And the nice thing about doing it early enough and being proactive is that I know I'm willing. I often offer to read those and make comments. Look, you are, some of us have been at many other institutions, and we've seen how other undergraduate programs run. You are going to be competing against people who have been at universities who've been grooming them for medical school all along, and they've been working on just what you're doing now, which is getting letters of recommendation and figuring out their clinical hours if they're interested in a professional program like that, right? They are doing these same things. And you need to do the same. You need to use every asset that's available to you. Ask us early enough. I'll read your letter. I will make sure you don't make grammatical errors. And you can, as many people as you can to get you feedback. But keep in mind that many of us look at a lot of these things. And there's some people on this Zoom whose feedback will be even more valuable than mine because it's not my field. But that's the advantage of time. Give us time to help you.
I just want to add that if you are even a freshman or a sophomore, and that is your intent, and you express that to me, from time to time, just set up a meeting. You know, I want to know what you did in your junior year. Maybe you are doing research. I would like to hear what you are doing. Maybe you have been participating in a special, really cool sort of community involvement activities. So just, you know, I want to know how you are growing in this institution.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone else wants to add, what are some do's and don'ts when asking you to write the letter of recommendation?
I think a lot of what we've said are really sort of a lot of the do's and don'ts. You know, ask early, send, you know, as much information. You know, I think a personal statement's a great thing. Your resume is a great thing. As much information as we can get. I'll tell you one thing that would be really helpful, and most students don't do, is if you've taken my class, tell me what grade you got in it and what semester you took it, because I spend quite a bit of time hunting for that information. So that would actually be a huge help. You know, again, don't ask, you know, a week before. Don't assume that we're going to write you a letter. I think, again, you know, I mean, if you got a D in my course, you probably don't want a letter from me. You know, so, you know, yeah, don't assume. And I think, you know, sort of going off what Dr. Pimentel said, if you ask early and you know, sort of do those periodic check-ins, I've had a couple of students, and I think this is brilliant, have attached their photo to the email. So I go, oh yeah, of course I remember you, because I might not by the name, but when I put the name with the face, it's like, oh yeah, now I can move forward a little bit more comfortably. So that I think is a huge bonus. You know, one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think is really important, is to thank your letter writers afterwards. So, you know, again, we're doing this because we want to see you succeed, but we also, you know, I mean, it is taking some time, and so we would love to, you know, get a thank you. We'd also love to hear how it went, right? So if we can hear, oh, I got an interview or I got accepted, that's what warms our hearts. that's what, you know, I mean, we know that what we're doing is making an actual difference. So those are things I would say, you know, do's. There's not that many don'ts in there, more do's than don'ts.
I want to add, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is that Angel? Go ahead, Angel. Oh, okay, so I want to add just one thing to the thanking you. Please feel free to thank me with a card or even an email. A simple email is enough. As much as I appreciate it, I don't want gift cards or cookies or other things. And that's not because I don't appreciate them. I mean, I would eat them for sure. And I would certainly, you know, use a Starbucks gift card. But my point from earlier is like, this is part of my job. And I appreciate your thanks. But I don't need an additional gesture. It's part of my job. It's a professional responsibility. That's why, right, when you ask for a letter, we respond because it's a professional responsibility. And so keep in mind as well, the whole, oh, if I got a D in this class, don't ask for a letter as a don't. That's because we have a professional responsibility to people who are in the admissions process of any institution to provide faithful information about your performance, right? And it's not, so there is a part of writing a letter that's very personal, and the more personal, the more influential the letter is, but that never escapes just the facts that we have to convey in a letter about your performance or your skill set or something like that, right? That there's, so keep in mind that it's a very personal thing. But it's a professional thing that we take very seriously as well. And that's why I think like, it's nice to have a gesture of a cookie or a coffee, but for me, I prefer not.
I just wanted to add that when you request that letter, you need to learn how to read in between lines. Maybe the professor is pressed with time. Some of us only teach, others have the teaching plus the research lab. Maybe they are writing a grant, and you need to find out if when we reply to you and say yes, we do it with some level of excitement about it, or we sound like, okay, so because it will be towards your own benefit, right? To make sure that professor is really motivated and excited about you applying, and you want, as a professor, want to be part of it. But if the professor is in a lot of stress submitting these grant proposals, then maybe you should look for somebody else.
I just wanted to follow up on what Dr. Cohen said about updates. Updates are my favorite part. Even if the update is, I'm going to try again. I love to hear it, but it's like so exciting to get that email back saying, I was accepted in here, or I had interviews here. And I mean, that's really what we want to hear. So thanks are definitely appreciated. And I would like to agree that cookies and coffees are nice, but just a thank you and a little bit of appreciation really goes a long way. But man, those updates are like the highlights for us. So please update us. We're waiting for updates.
And I do want to just point out again, I know you have another session coming up about admissions committees, but again, I'm on the admissions committee for the College of Medicine here, and I have to say the letters really do make a difference. So you do want to pick your letter writers, people who are going to be able to talk you up. We've also had letter writers that are and that can keep you somewhat out of a program. So you do want to pick carefully, and and again, I think the thank you is especially if you don't get in that round, you're going to go back to that professor and ask them again. A thank you for the first letter is going to go a long way for a reapplicant.
I had a quick question as well. Along with this being all virtual, I was wondering what information you would prefer to have us come in the email asking for a letter of recommendation, as opposed to what you would actually like to hear us talk about when we met with you on Zoom to kind of go over what we have done and like what the balance there is.
Personally, for myself, the initial email, I like to have the, a little bit of background as to what you're doing and why, and then the request for a letter. And then from there, I can say, here's the information I would like, or let's set up a Zoom meeting. So I prefer that just because sometimes it's just overwhelming when you receive all the information in the letter and you haven't even necessarily said yes to writing it. So that's just my personal preference. It's just a little asking, and then from there I can ask for what would help me write the best letter I can.
I agree 100%. Any email that you want a response to that for follow-up, just keep it a couple of sentences. I took your class then at this point in time, something like, I'm applying to this school. Would you consider writing me a letter of recommendations? The perfect first email.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for being here. I will now like to hand it over to Angelina and Lady to introduce panel